One. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you all and welcome you all for coming. Welcome everyone for coming and joining us today. Um, I do want to take a second to introduce myself. If you don't already know me, my name is Dunica Dorsey, and I'm the account manager for the Central Valley here. I cover as far south as Bakersfield, all the way up north to Modesto, and as well as some Central Coast. So yeah, I'm a little bit of everywhere in here in the Valley. And if I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, I am really looking forward to getting in your office and dropping off some of this good swag that we have. Um, Also, I would like to introduce my guest, who is Dr. Teddy Springfield, as well as Melissa Castillo. Melissa Castillo, they are from MedLegal Evaluators, and they actually, I'm going to give it over to Dr. Teddy Springfield to introduce himself as well. But before I do that, I do want to remind you all, this is a Q&A. So if you do have any questions, don't be shy. You can unmute yourself and you can ask your question, or if you don't have the ability to unmute, you can also type your question in and I'll do my very best to read your question out. And so that way Dr. Springfield can answer. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Springfield so we can get started. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. I do have some questions that I personally have been asked while out in the field by attorneys. So I am going to ask those questions to Dr. Springfield and allow him to answer those. But again, this is a Q&A, so this is for you all to get your questions answered today. So it's out to you, Dr. Springfield.
Perfect. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. And I think we all understand that with SIF, we're looking at individuals that have really had a tough time in life. They've had a lot of pre-existing issues. And then after that, they've also had a work comp injury, or what we call a subsequent injury. And so I'm just honored to be able to help attorneys and help clients to be able to gain the benefits that they rightfully deserve. And on the call, I've also got Melissa. She's our I would say, my right hand person, the whole company's right hand person. She's our regional account executive, and she is out in the field all the time, even through the toughest parts. She went out there and braved all of those things, and of course was masked and made sure that she stayed healthy and gave everybody that opportunity to spend some time with her and get to know her a lot better. And so she's looking forward to being in the Central Valley and assisting attorneys and their clients. So
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for joining us today. So I'm going to get started with the questions. The first one I have, while I'm out in the field, Dr. Springfield, a lot of the attorneys, the first question I always get is how does an applicant attorney start the process of an SIBTF claim? So can you just explain a little bit on how that process or the application process is started?
certainly, it's a very simple form in terms of what the state requires, and it's just a 2-page form that they just need some basic details. ADJ number, of course, the patient's name, and a little history of what their subsequent injury is. And then you put the ADJ number in there. This is what gets people confused. And then SIF turns it into an SIF number. So they just drop the ADJ and put SIF. And once that is filed, and Melissa can go through that a little later, but she files those to assist attorneys all the time. And it's a simple process, but it gets the ball started. And once that happens, then we show the attorney's office how to basically follow the steps to simplify everything. And that's what we're here for. It's what Melissa's there for, to give support to the attorneys and to their staff. One thing we've found is, and we work with well over 100 attorneys throughout the state, but we found the reality is the attorneys are so overloaded with work comp cases that they feel that this is sometimes could be a burden on their staff. And our job is to take that burden off of them and like I said, simplify that process for them.
Very good, very good. That is good to know because, like you said, a lot of attorneys or their staff, they do sometimes feel like if they're already swamped, they don't have another thing to add on. So that's great reassurance to know that Melissa is there to help with that process. Another question I get is, how do we determine initially who might be a good SIBTF candidate?
Well, that's a great question. And this becomes a very critical part of what we do. In order to identify a potential candidate, um, it really helps. We have a general health questionnaire. It's 7 pages. It sounds like it's really long, but it's very simple. And Art Johnson, who teaches this to attorneys throughout the state, basically uses our general health questionnaire because he found that it was probably the most thorough document that he'd ever used to help identify the potential SIBTF cases or SIF cases in short. So what happens is the client, when they, a lot of attorneys now, the client, when they walk in the door, they also, they determine whether it's an appropriate work comp case. And if it looks like it's going to be a good workers' comp case, then they also have them fill out the general health questionnaire. Gives the attorney a great overview of other medical conditions that their client has or has had in the past. So once those are identified, you can do Art Johnson says he looks at the subsequent injury case, and if it looks like it's going to qualify for a work comp case, then once he fills the other part, the client fills everything else out, the other form, then what happens is he has a pretty good idea if they're going to be able to qualify for SIF benefits. And I'll break that down in a little bit because it can be a little confusing, but it's really not that difficult. And so let me just respond to that just for a second. We've got a couple gatekeeper thresholds is what we call them. And a client can have for SIF, 5% opposite and corresponding injury. It could be congenital. We help to qualify that with our form. But what happens is if they have 5% opposite and corresponding either to an eye, an upper body extremity or lower body extremity, and they got at least 5% PD when they close the work comp case, that client, if they have an opposite and corresponding, so let's just say on the work comp case, it was a right shoulder and they got 6%, let's say. And on the opposite upper extremity, it was a left wrist. As long as that was affected, you don't have to actually quantify it. If it was affected previous to the work comp injury, then that person, in theory, qualifies for at least opening a case. So they can file the SIF application and get started. But what we have to understand, and I just looked at one today from an attorney, they definitely had over 5%. But what the issue becomes is what types of pre-existing issues, medical conditions did they have? We have to get to a level, it has to be a total of 70%. So that 70% is all the pre-existing whole person impairment and combined with the workers' comp. And so if there's 5%, we have to make up 65%. It sounds like it's hard to do. It's really not that hard to do because a lot of people have a lot of pre-existing diabetes, heart conditions, psychological issues, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking to, the magic number is always at least 70%, somewhere between 70 to 100%. Now, the second way to get there is if it looks like your client is going to have pretty substantial PD on the work comp case, let's just take, for instance, it's 40%. Let's just say that. Then they automatically qualify to open the SIF application because we need at least 35%, 5% or 35%, and the magic number is 70. So our job is to make sure that we get all the medical records so that all of them. So we call it from birth right on up to the actual subsequent injury. We want every medical record that we can obtain. And that's where you come in, because we need those records in order to do a good job. So the more records we have, the more documentation we can provide, the easier it is for us to be able to write substantial reports, substantial evidence reports for the attorneys. That makes their life so much easier. So if I confused anybody, let me know.
No, that was very clear. But if anybody has a question on what Dr. Springfield just explained, then you can unmute yourself or put it in the chat, whichever you prefer. Thank you for that, Dr. Springfield. That is it. That was a big question too that I always get. What are the thresholds when it comes to the SIF? So next, like evaluating potential cases, is there a simplified tool or a checklist that may be available that can help the attorney determine who might qualify?
Yes, that what we've done is we have an introductory checklist, and all these things that I'm talking about, we share with every attorney group that we work with. So we've got sample letters, we've got documents that just show step by step so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've been doing this now for over 6 years, and we've worked the bugs out very well. So that what happens is Melissa comes into that picture very early on, and she goes in and assists the attorneys or the paralegals or the office managers, whoever's help assisting the attorney, to basically, she will actually go through A to Z to help them to figure out exactly what needs to be done. She'll show them, she'll give them samples. She'll, even if she needs to, she'll type up the report, she'll file the application. But we like to do that with the first 2 or 3 so that they can understand the process. And some attorney groups that we work with are extremely large, and they still don't have enough staff to handle it. So Melissa can go in there and give them all the assistance that they need. And of course, all we do is set it up, give them samples, and then the attorneys obviously are going to change whatever they need to change their recommendations so that it's their work, not ours. But we just want to give them some assistance so that they're not burning their staff out. That's what we're trying to do.
Very nice, very nice. Okay, so the next question I have here, are there any statute of limitations when it comes to SIF?
Well, it's an excellent question. We get asked that all the time. And I wish I could tell you that there is a rock solid answer to that. But in 6 years, here's what we found. As a rule of thumb, we used to basically say that 5 years from the date that you open the work comp case or the subsequent injury case, and 1 year post closure, either STIP or CNR. So, but here's what we found. It really doesn't make any difference. We've got cases that are 13, 14 years old post closure. Why? Because the attorney at that time did not know that there was an SIF fund. They didn't know it. And so therefore, later on, they found out, and maybe they called their client or the client came back in for something and they opened the case. And we do not have thousands of people that we've seen. We've never had an issue with that at all. So rule of thumb is, if you've got a case and you didn't know that the fund existed and your client didn't know, then in that particular case, we will take that case and we will work it up. And we have not seen one issue.
Awesome. Okay, I have a question from Kathy. So this question is, So let's see, what is the next step once they receive the last report from the evaluator?
It's a great question. Um, here's how I would answer that. And obviously, I'm not an attorney, but I've worked with a lot of attorneys, and we still do. And so the bottom line is the fund is very overloaded. The I would say the caseload for each probably attorney that they have right now for the state is well over 1,000 cases. So therefore, it's not what you do is you write a demand letter. We have sample demands that we've got from other attorneys, and that simplifies that process. But in the demand, you basically say that, please respond within um, 10 days or 15 days. You put your timeline on there. And if they haven't responded, then you're just going to file a DOR. That's how you get their attention. And that's what really starts the process, because they are not going to respond to you just with a demand letter. It's got to be a given date that if they don't respond, then you're going to file a DOR.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure that that was that helped her out. And
Great question.
yes, it was. So what if the case settles? What are the long and short term benefits?
Here's here's what happens, and I've got to say this, I'm not going to be 100% accurate on this because I don't know the exact stats. I can only tell you from what attorneys tell me that unless you've got 100% case, and it's a solid 100% PD case with the combined totals, Art Johnson always says, take it to trial, because 100%, 99% versus 100%, it's still a lot of money. So the other part of that is if it's a 95%, they're normally just going to negotiate with you. Now, what we've found and what the attorneys have told us is that our reports are extremely thorough. We document what needs to be documented, because otherwise what happens is they're going to try to continue just to knock it down and knock it down. So we give you a 95% report, you better believe we backed it up, and we give you what we call labor disabling factors, which means that the client had, without that, you really can't substantiate what you're doing. So that's why the records become so important to us, because we can document if somebody had high blood pressure, and then they could tell us, yes, I had high blood pressure, I couldn't do X, Y, Z. We document all of that in there, because without labor disabling factors, which a lot of groups don't put in there, you really don't have a substantial report.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And can
So
you?
sorry, there's just one other aspect of that.
Yeah,
So the the short answer is that more than likely you'll end up closing the case and um, and then settling it out. But if not, if you want to go for a lifetime benefit, then the attorney gets a fee, 15% of the lifetime benefits. So let's say you had a client that was 50 years old and perhaps not in terrible health. They don't have major cancer or anything else. And maybe the life expectancy is another 25 years. Then that's a choice that you both can make. So the client can get a check every 2 weeks, and the attorney gets a check every 2 weeks. And you do this for 4, 5, 6 years. All of a sudden now you've got a lot of checks coming in. So we look at it and we tell the attorney, it's like an annuity. It's almost like a retirement plan for you. And Art Johnson says he put his kids through college with that, and he still continues to get checks, and he will until the client passes away. But once the client passes away, that stops the whole process. So their family doesn't get it, et cetera, et cetera. So.
And is there, I know with any other benefit in California, there's a cost of living increase. does it get
Yes,
increased over
COLA.
time? Or- Okay,
Yes.
okay,
And so that means every year, whatever that may be, it's usually for this, it's usually 3%. That adds up over a period of time and
right,
becomes very significant over a period of time. So,
right. And what is it that MedLegal evaluators can provide for the law offices? Can you just run by that again and kind of explain to the
yes,
attorneys here what?
I would say that the most important thing we do to begin with is we send you a link to Box, BOX. And it used to be Dropbox. Dropbox still exists, but Box allows us, because sometimes we get so many records from you, the attorneys would run out of room in Dropbox. So in Box, it's unlimited. It costs the attorneys, the attorney offices, there's no cost to it at all. And that's the other thing I want to mention. For SIF, there is no cost to any attorney group. There's no cost to the client, no cost at all for the attorney group. So everything we do, we get paid by the fund. And if they don't pay us, then you know what? They don't pay us. So once we set up Box, in Box, we have sample letters. We have how to basically start the entire process. You would the attorney would compose a cover letter, and we show sample cover letters in there for the initial evaluation. And then our doctor would evaluate that client and determine if they need specialists. And if they do, then we provide a specialty cover letter. And all they have to do is to drop down whichever one, if psych was involved or internal medicine or optometry, it'd be right there. All they have to do is just check the box and then send it in, and we take it from there. The other document, there's a bunch of other documents that I don't necessarily put in Box, but one of them is it's an attorney-client fee agreement. We found through the years that becomes very important, because this is not a work comp case, evidently. So it's a separate fee agreement altogether. So some of the attorneys that I'm very, very close to allowed me to share that with other attorneys. And I think it's a critical thing to have. And that way your client knows this is separate from the work comp case. This is a separate fee agreement altogether, and you can lock it in.
Okay, so we have someone that has they have a case where they've received their last report. So would they just rate the report like they do for on the workers, like they do on the workers' comp case? Or can you
See,
explain a little bit how that works?
yeah, that's a great question as well. As doctors, we don't figure out PD. That's not our job. So that's definitely the attorney's job. So what we do is it's always going to be WPI. And so what that means is we may have a client that has 150% WPI. And so that gets negotiated, because then the attorney turns it into PD. And so bottom line is age and occupation. So everything has to calculate out, and that's where the attorneys figure that out. That's just not something that we do.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Did that answer your question, Kathy? Let's see. So right now I'd like to, open it up for any questions that you guys may have. And you can, like I said, you can unmute yourself or you can put them in the chat section. And we can take this time right now just to question anything Dr. Springfield has covered already. We have about 20 minutes left before we're going to go ahead and conclude it.
I just saw a
Looks like we have a question from Nadia.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. Hi, Dr. Springfield.
Hello.
Hi, I just wanted to, I always get asked on the field as well. law offices seem to think that they may not have those particular cases, or that it's very difficult to obtain. But yet, when I've been out on the field, I've identified that the average law office has anywhere from 15 to 25% that they don't even know that they have. And so what I've been told by attorneys is, look, we're doing a better intake form at this current time, which allows us to then be staying in touch with the client and being able to see and identify, once the case is CNR'd or before the case is CNR'd, whether or not this person is going to qualify for the Sibtf. And so I wanted you to just touch base and confirm, the hidden gems that are in the law offices that they don't even know that they have. And as you start speaking to them, they're like, hey, I've got a couple of cases like that, because they think it's very difficult to get up to that in Eval, but it isn't. Can you please elaborate?
Melissa, you want to answer that? Because you're out in the field all the time.
Nope, oh, there we go. We can hear you.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, Melissa.
Melissa, can you, you're out in the field with attorneys all the time, and you're assisting them in terms of identifying cases. How difficult have you found that to be? And approximately what percentage of an attorney's, and this is not totally across the board, but just an average of what you see, just in terms of like maybe every 10 cases, how many potential Sibtf cases would be there?
So potentially there is about maybe 25%, just like Nadia said, within the last year of them actually closing some cases. I want to say, for example, yesterday I probably reviewed a good 50 cases, and we got maybe 18, 19, 20 of them that we actually set aside to have the office call. It's a great way to start bringing in some money, especially now. It's a great time to bring in that additional cash. It does take a little bit longer because we have to wait the year mostly for SIF to settle, but you're bringing in money from clients that you already had. Trying to actually see if they qualify is quite easy at first. Yes, it's kind of confusing, but as long as there's a 25% WPI from the either PQME or however the case settled, 25% WPI, we times that by the 1.4, which will make it about a 35% PD. My information's on there as well on the link. So if you guys have any questions, completely feel free to reach out to me.
That's a great point that Melissa brought up. And we actually spell that out for you just in terms of a WPI, whole person impairment. For some of you, I didn't break that down, but whole person impairment, if you've got 25 DWC modifier from January the 1st, 2013, you've got a specific modifier. So therefore, again, 1.4, and then you are at your 35%. So it helps to get your clients qualified. And it's rather simple, actually. And we've got that down to a science now to assist you with that.
I have one more question, follow-up. I walked into the attorney's office and they had actually shown me their first check that they received for the client and for themselves, because obviously the attorney continues to get a certain percentage for the duration of the person's life. And they had said that they were just in a case that Melissa had handled not too long ago, where unfortunately the client passed away, but that they were able to roll that benefit over to the family beneficiaries. Is that correct?
That is correct. If the case closes before the client passes away. So we've got a case, we've had many cases where stage 4 cancers, liver, kidneys, et cetera. And so what we try to do is we try to fast track those cases, that we give those top priority. And when an attorney calls us up and says, listen, I don't know how much longer this client's going to live, because a lot of these clients are in terrible shape and very challenged situation. But I've never seen where if they had already said that they closed it and the paperwork was signed, and then after that the client died, maybe before the check came in, yes, they would actually, that would go to their family.
That's amazing. I just think that's so important. And I don't know who was happier, the client or the attorney. All of us just got emotional. It was very, very nice to know. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Dr. Springfield, this is Todd Tatro. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
I had a couple things. You were discussing the opening process in response to a question. I think from a practice standpoint, it's probably also a good thing to file the petition for joinder of Sibtf along with your application for SIF benefits.
Yes, absolutely. Correct? Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's something that I thought was probably important to mention. And then also, I think it was covered, but so it's clear the 35% that you have to qualify for is before adjustment for age and occupation.
Yes, correct.
So the 40% example you gave may or may not get you there, I guess, depending upon, you know, what the whether you met the 35% threshold before adjustment for age and occupation.
Correct.
Okay. And then the other question I had, Doctor, is you had mentioned the medical questionnaire and then also some of the various example letters and other documents. And I wasn't quite clear, where can those be found?
Oh, in a box. So we send you a link for box, and in that link, we give you the checklist, we give you the sample letters, et cetera, et cetera. All of that's included.
Okay, and that includes the medical questionnaire intake you were talking about, I believe the 7-page document?
Yes, in 3 languages, 4 languages actually. English, obviously, Spanish, Tagalog, and also Cantonese or Chinese. I'm not sure exactly. We may have broken that down into 2 different dialects. I'm not sure. But yeah, those are 4 samples that we have that we make available to you.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Tatro, for asking. That was also another question that someone had. Where can the introductory checklist be found? Is it available in the box? So thank you, Dr. Springfield, for answering that. And thank you, everyone, for your questions. If there's anyone else out there that'd like to get something cleared up or another question you may have, feel free to go ahead and unmute and ask. I just want to remind everyone too, Gemini does partner with with Teddy and his group, and Dr. Springfield and his group, and Melissa as well, to go ahead and get those records for you guys. I'm available to come in and copy, or to come in and write down all of the locations that the applicant was seen at and provide those records to you guys as well. So you can contact Dr. Springfield to get that started, or you can contact me. Either one of us will be available, Melissa, myself, or Dr. Springfield. If anyone has any other questions that you'd like Dr. Springfield to answer, we have about 15-20 minutes left.
Hi, I have one more question. Sorry. I mean, I'm taking advantage of it because it's a learning experience for everybody. I also wanted to, you know, when I explain to clients, I always say it's like the wild, wild west, because anything that you would have thought that would not have been considered under the workers' comp is now being considered, you know, including hysterectomies and childhood traumas and all that. Is that correct? And can one of you elaborate on that as well? Because I always explain it and they're like, okay, so everything out the door that's work comp related, it's all the pre-existing that you would never even think about. And that's again why the intake is so important. Teddy, Melissa, can you elaborate?
Well, here's what I will say. We have, when the attorney sends us a cover letter requesting the initial evaluation, we give them samples of what we like to see in that. We have some attorneys that give us a 25-page cover letter. They don't miss a detail. But for the most part, we get a 2-page cover letter. And what we'd really like to know is, what knowledge the attorney has of pre-existing injuries. So if they have, the client has filled out the general health questionnaire, certainly we see that, we go through it, but sometimes the attorney goes through and just finds out some things that maybe the client didn't fill out the paperwork too thoroughly. I mean, we all know that we have people that come in that have some serious memory issues, post-concussion, post-traumatic, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to make sure that anything that the attorney can give us that can basically guide us is a really big deal for us. And the other part of that is once we get the initial records from Gemini, it's like an onion. We try to peel the skin off and all the layers of the onion to try to get down to the bottom facts of what we need to help this client qualify. And if they qualify, again, we are going to document it to the hilt because that's really important. So the client may have said, you know what, or maybe they bring their spouse with them sometimes and said, well, don't you remember this happened? Oh yeah, I forgot all about that. So then we have a section in there that we need to request more records. And then back at Med Legal Evaluators, we've got somebody there, Jackie in particular. She goes through that section to say, okay, Dunica, Nadia, somebody please get us these records because we're missing them and we really need them to document the case. And so sometimes that takes a while, as we all know, to get all the records that we need. But what we found is that our process, as we go through it, in the very end, before we write a final report. So what we do is the initial evaluator, they do their job, they recommend the specialist, and then they put everything together. And usually by that time, we've got more records, and then they a final report versus 113 pages maybe in the initial report. This might be just a 10 to 15 page report, but it summarizes everything, documents everything, and gives the final WPI.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Dr. Springfield. I do have a question regarding billing. Let's see, are these reports billed as usual, ML 102 to 104?
That is correct, until the fee schedule changes, supposedly April the 1st, but we'll see. Yes, so the answer to that is yes, it's billed out exactly the same 15-minute rate, exactly that.
Okay. And then I think Melissa had something to add before I go to the next question I have here.
Thank you. For Nadia's question in regards to like hysterectomies and other pre-existing conditions, the great thing about SIF is we can pick up depression, anxiety, stress. We can pick up sexual dysfunction with SIF. Since 2013, since that can't be added to your work comp, we can definitely pick it up on the SIF portion. So labor disabling factors that you wouldn't really take into consideration for your work comp can definitely be a part of your SIF.
Yes.
Yes, the psych component, you know, as a vocal rehab counselor, I'm always thinking about that. And there's so many things that are debilitating that aren't really necessarily recognized under the workers' comp that you guys capture so eloquently. And it really helps to, put that, in the spotlight to identify other factors that the work comp arena may not be considering about whether or not this person can go back to suitable gainful employment. So yeah, thank you so much for that, Melissa. Thank you so much, Dr. Eddie.
You're welcome.
Mr. Dorsey, Dr. Springfield, do the subsequent labor disabling factors matter?
Well, the answer to that is it's going to matter to the fund, because otherwise they're basically going to try to fight you and basically said, well, we admit they had diabetes, but there's nothing in the record, and there's no substantiating verbal comments from the client that was an issue. Now, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes the client has something and they tell us point blank, it never bothered me. I never missed a beat, et cetera, et cetera. And so we got to call it the way we see it. But again, when we're peeling that onion back, a lot of times the client all of a sudden says, well, yeah, you know what? I couldn't climb the ladder anymore, or I was afraid to climb the ladder, or I had some kidney issues and I had to be, or bladder issues, and I had to be close to the bathroom all the time. All these things can be added in, and but we need to know them, and then we attempt again to document them as best we can.
Thank you for that. Let's see, we have about 10 more minutes for those who jumped on a little late. Thank you for joining this. We have Melissa Castillo here who covers Central Valley as well, or actually anywhere in California. She goes everywhere, who also can support you with your SIF cases. Dr. Teddy Springfield, we have his contact information in the chat section. I'm also available for any questions. We partner with Dr. Springfield and his group to get those medical records for your SIF cases and claims. Let's see, so if there's any other questions you guys have, feel free to unmute or chat them or put them in the chat section, and I'll read them out for you and get those answered for you. We just want to be able to get everything answered as much as possible today. Let's see. Anything else, Dr. Springfield, you'd like to cover?
Well, I think that the most important thing, and I kind of started off with this, is that we have some very, very seriously injured people, injured workers, and they had a lot of issues prior to that. We have people that we've seen that have injuries from the war, different wars, depending on their age. We have people that have just been traumatized through various circumstances that are very hard for them to bring up and talk about. But so we just want to make sure that we give everybody a fair shot and to be able to get the benefits that they deserve. As we all know, and I think with few exceptions, I can say this, that most injured workers do not get a fair shake anymore. I just don't see that happening. I just think that they just don't get compensated for their injuries as well as I'd like to see them compensated for it. So if we can give them another bite of the apple, and well-deserved, we're not going to give anybody anything that they don't deserve, that we can't back up. And but if we can help them do that, we can change some lives, and that's what we're looking to do. That's what keeps us in this.
That's right. And also, if just to put this out there as well, Gemini, you would never see a bill from Gemini as well for any of the medical portion. We do bill the Sibtf entity, so all of those bills get paid through them. Oh, let's see. Any other questions you guys have out there? For those who may have joined late and want to get something answered. Melissa, would you like to comment on anything else?
So there is something that I was thinking about. Sometimes when you have a CNR and you don't have like a final rating, we can definitely take a look at it. We can take a look at it. I literally have our doctors on speed dial. I'm typically on the phone with Dr. Joseph Mingstein all day long. So we can definitely take a look at it to see if he can either, we can have the client qualify, if there is a rating that we can do just to see if, I mean, obviously it has to be accurate towards the work comp portion of it, but we can also do something with a case that hasn't been fully rated.
And I think the important thing too is that all of our doctors have been trained by Dr. Dennis Sosine. And Dr. Sosine, for those of you that know him, is very well respected, teaches for the DIR, and he's trained over 2,200 QMEs in his career so far and continues to do it. And so every specialist you can think of, every specialty you can think of, he is actually trained. So we've got a good group to be able to, as a consultant, we can pick up the phone anytime and call him, and he assists us all the time. And our evaluators, whether they're psychologists, psychiatrists, neuropsychs, internal medicine, they consult with him all the time. So he is available to us any given day, and he reviews reports for us. And I remember a case that he had in San Jose. They threw a very well-respected doctors out. The judge threw this doctor, and I know very well, threw his report out. And so the attorney, who lectures a lot in SIF, decided to bring Dr. Sosine in to redo it. And by the time they finished, the client ended up with $800,000. So it completely changed that person's life. Right. So some of these can be extremely substantial. I'm not saying all of them, by no means would I ever say that. But again, if somebody got an extra $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for what they've suffered, I think that's a big plus. Right.
I do have one other question here. Let's see. Are all treatment and medical legal records required? Let's see. I saw something that said no treatment records are required.
No treatment records are required.
The medical records, I'm assuming, yes, the medical record part.
Yeah, so what we want every record that we can get. We'd like to have a copy of the subsequent injury, all the records there. If there's any depots, if there's any previous work comp cases prior to that, subsequent injuries that maybe wouldn't have qualified, and then you're using the last one. And that becomes interesting too, because sometimes somebody had a really serious work comp injury, which was maybe not the latest one, but the one prior to that. We can't use anything past whichever one we use in the future, but we can certainly go back in the past and use those injuries and document those cases. So that's why sometimes it's fairly easy to qualify somebody.
Okay. Well, let's see, it's 2:51 now, and I want to respect everyone's time and your guys' time as well. And I just want to thank you guys again for joining. And if there isn't any more questions out there, or if there is anything else Dr. Springfield would like to.
Question. Sorry, I've been waiting for this all week.
Yes.
So the attorney says to me, okay, so I do the application and essentially the ADJ now changes to an Sibtf using the same case number. And sometimes I get an attorney that asks, okay, so how long before we can identify that this is going to be approved and or the benefit is going to kick in? And I've explained, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's like a quarterback, and they're telling all their players to build up this report that is then submitted. And if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it's a duck. And essentially it's pretty easy and it comes to resolution quite quickly as long as you have the materials. Is that correct, or am I missing anything?
Melissa, do you want to answer that?
Nadia, she's absolutely correct.
Right.